Guys, welcome to the First Responder Playbook. I am joined today by retired Secret Service agent Brad Beeler. Brad, I'm not going to do you justice, so I'll let you give your own intro today.
No, I really appreciate it, Brent. Thanks for having me on. No, small town kid, got enamored by the Secret Service during an internship that I had with them in St. Louis. And I was there for a protective visit as part of the internship. And I think I was more drawn to the agents than I was the president. And the more I got to see the men and women, what they did under very, very difficult circumstance, zero fail mission, was definitely drawn to it. So 25 years later, here I am. Started in Chicago, St. Louis, Columbia, South Carolina, were my duty assignments. 25 years and then 17 years in the polygraph program. And our polygraph program is a little bit different. We test our applicants, but we also reach out to the local communities and try to leverage our skill set to help them out for all they do for us. We couldn't do our job without what they do for our protective investigative mission. So about 1,000 cases of child sexual assault, murder, those types of things. So in that course of time, learned a little bit about communication, what to do, and unfortunately what not to do. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Are you originally from Missouri?
Yeah, I'm originally from about an hour west of St. Louis. And grew up a Cardinals fan. And, the good thing about going to grad school there is I got to work some research projects in criminology. And St. Louis has its crime problems, much like several other, Kansas City, Detroit, Memphis. So I got to see a lot of interesting kind of case studies firsthand.
I don't hold it against me, but I'm a big New York Mets baseball fan, and so actually St. Louis is usually the closest NL team to go watch, and I love going to Busch Stadium. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, we grew up, growing up in the 80s, I always thought the Mets were pond scum,
Yeah.
right? That's
I
what we
mean,
were.
and to tie it in a little bit, I'm a huge Keith Hernandez fan, longtime
Yeah, that was the
Cardinal.
one. That was the one that got away. I think he was having some personal issues, and you guys took advantage of us and definitely fleeced us on that trade.
Yeah, I we actually go to St. Louis every year. We go to the ILETA conference
Yeah.
in St. Louis, and
Hmm.
it's such a beautiful city, but it's a rough city for sure. And
Yeah, they definitely have seen the industrial base since the 50s pull out. And as a result, just a lack of resources and schooling and other things. There's definitely some issues in St. Louis, but the men and women in the St. Louis Police Department and County Police Department that I got to work with a lot are amazing, given all the challenges that they have.
absolutely. So your original duty station once you got out the Secret Service was Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago, big arch rival of pretty much everything St. Louis. But as far as being able to have a place to start, it was a great opportunity because Secret Service, a lot of people don't know that we have such an investigative arm. That's where we were started in 1865 with counterfeit, electronic crimes now, computer fraud, those types of things. So that's kind of where I got, myself kind of learned and grew up a little bit as an agent and then got into polygraph there. We also do protection when you were in your field office assignments. And then I went my permanent protection assignment, which was George Herbert Walker Bush. So I did 4 years on that detail. Then went to St. Louis where I got back into polygraph. And then the last 8 years I spent at the National Center of Credibility Assessment, which is basically the federal polygraph school in South Carolina, where I taught interview interrogation to all the federal agents that kind of came through that school. So the good part was, and I'm sure you're, a big believer in this, is that anytime you can surround yourself with other law enforcement, any type of training, you tend to pick the good, the bad that other people are doing, and kind of it's like a buffet. And I was blessed to be able to see how other people were doing good things to try to put together a good baseline of what we think are best practices.
Absolutely. Um, what's your probably favorite story that you can tell from being either in Chicago or being on HW's detail? What's your favorite story?
Man, just how they're normal people. I mean, from a protective standpoint, just, these people get up and they put their shoes on like everybody else. And when you're on a smaller detail, like a former president detail, I mean, obviously Trump, when he had his former detail, was huge. But especially 20 some years removed, 41, but we call him Bush 41, he was much more laid back but just a great American hero. I mean, literally got shot down at the age of 18 in World War II, and just CIA director, vice president, obviously just an amazing background, but just such great people. They wouldn't travel on Christmas. because they wanted the agents to be with their families. I was a rescue swimmer and a boater on his detail, so we got to know him just a little bit. He was always on the water when he was up at Kennebunkport, and just great, great human beings. I just vividly remember him calling the owner of the Cardinals on our behalf, and there were 2 or 3 Cardinals fans on his detail, and we're up at interleague for the Red Sox. The Cardinals were, and he got us tickets right behind home plate. So my son was 4 years old. His first baseball game was right behind home plate and at Fenway. So it's just, you hear a lot of stories about politics, and that's one of the stories and there's many, many more of how good our protectees are. We were very blessed. I had a blessed career in that regard.
Awesome. I love that. Um, I think that the Secret Service, a lot of times people just kind of look out there and say, man, that's just like the mountaintop you're never going to see and interact. And I've actually really, truly only interacted with them one time. And it was, I was new at a municipal agency in Oklahoma, and it was during the Hillary Trump election.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that had threatened Hillary Clinton
Mm-hmm.
online. And so he showed up at our police department. He said, hey, will you guys go out here with me? I need to make contact with this guy. And my field training officer at the time was very familiar with him. And I think the guy had some mental problems. And I'll never forget, I'd been a cop probably 3 or 4 years at that point, but I was new at that agency. So I was still trying to figure out how they operated and
Yeah.
everything. And Secret Service agent says, hey, like, I don't have to agree with anything that she says, but
Mm-hmm.
my job is to protect her. And if you show up with any weapons, I will take care of the threat in
Yeah.
a lot less diplomatic way than I just said it. And I started cracking up, and I looked at my FTO and I'm like, I can't say that, can I? And he's like, no, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
so,
No, it's interesting you bring that up because 99% of my career has been very boring, sitting in a stairwell or working pretty nondescript cases. But that 1%, you see some pretty interesting things. But we couldn't do it without the local men and women that are bringing the investigative cases to us. But also, I mean, imagine any protective visit of any size, the majority of the people are state and local law enforcement that are there in those outer perimeters they're the ones that are really at risk. I mean, obviously, this is the 1-year anniversary of Butler, so that was a little bit different, but it just goes to show you when that communication breaks down between the locals and the Secret Service, you obviously have problems there. So a lot of lessons learned from that, and hopefully, it's my former agency now, but hopefully we can learn from those lessons, and hopefully that will never take place again.
absolutely. So, how did you decide that you wanted to originally get involved in polygraphs?
Yeah, so the communication journey started for me when I was a little kid, and that my best friend still to this day I met at 15, and he's deaf. And it really taught me about how to communicate and how important communication is, because he would only see the words. He never saw the soundtrack. He never saw music. It'd be like if you watched a horror movie and you didn't hear the music right before that bad thing happened, right? He went through life having to do that. And so I learned sign language, but more importantly, I realized you had to be present in a communication and in a conversation. And that kind of stayed with me throughout my career. And when I saw the men and women in our polygraph program, what they would come out of a room with, whether it be with an applicant, because we do test our applicants for national security issues. And then also what we would do is we would test, once again, a lot of the local cases, but what they would walk out of the room with as far as the admissions, I mean, they were selling jail, and they were very good at it. And it was impressive. And that a lot of people, there's, both sides of the fence when it comes to polygraph, but if done on the right person at the right place at the right time with rigid quality control, where it's not like a Jerry Springer type thing, right? Where it's very regimented in the right circumstances, it's a great tool. And I always like to give the analogy, it's kind of like a mammogram. Mammograms are not perfect. They're about 85% effective, but my wife's living proof, having been a cancer survivor, that they work and they lead to further tests. So polygraph should be done the same way. It should be part of an investigation. It should not be the investigation.
I like that you clarified that because you always hear
Mhm.
like the good you hear the pluses from officers of the use of them, and then the public you're like, well, they're not that reliable. And so I like
Mhm.
that you clarified that, and that it's not the be all end all, but it is a good tool to move forward in an investigation.
Yeah, just a tool. Another analogy I like to give is it's kind of like a smoke detector. People are like, well, a smoke detector doesn't detect fire. Well, you're going to get some misreads if you had a smoke detector in the kitchen, right? Because you're going to be cooking. But if I've got a smoke detector in the right place of the house, like a bedroom, wouldn't I want to know if that's going off? Yeah, it doesn't detect fire, but it detects 500 degrees and smoke. Well, that's probably I'm going to need to get out of that room, or it's going to shape my investigation. So once again, it's all about where we utilize it, and that's sometimes where the problem is that sometimes polygraph is used in the wrong place, or political pressure is forcing it to be used, and that's when you hear the horror stories about it. Is we tend to really be very rigid with how we apply it. And when it comes to applicants, the vast majority of derogatory information that's of good adjudicated purposes comes from a robust polygraph program. And for anybody afraid of a polygraph, the key thing is just be honest on your application forms. If you're honest on those application forms, you get a good night's sleep, you get food in your belly, you come in and you bare your soul, chances are you're going to have a positive outcome with that polygraph. Where most people have problems is they jump on the internet, they see 2 million hits when they Google it, and most of them are bad, and they try to mess with the polygraph, or they left that one thing off their application form. When you leave one thing off your forms, what are you going to be thinking about during the test? That one thing. And that molehill becomes a mountain. So just don't do that. Just be honest, bare your soul, and chances are you're going to have a good day.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've been through two polygraphs. One I think went very well, and one I think went terrible. The very first time I went through one, I'll tell a story. I don't have a problem saying it. When I was like 12,
Mhm.
I'm going to date myself a little bit, but we went to the mall during a science fair to like pass time. For my younger listeners, they had shops all together, and you went and
Mhm.
hung out. And there was a little pretzel shop in there, and there was a long line, and I had grabbed a bottle of pop, and I waited, and to be honest with you, I literally just walked off and forgot because I've been waiting in line so long. And I went back to pay for it. The line was long, and I never did. It's the only thing I've ever taken, you know, truthfully in my life. And I went through my first polygraph, and I put it on there, and he said, "Hey, I'm detecting the way I'm asking my question is throwing you for a loop." And he reworded his question. He's like, "All right, moving forward." And that was the only issue I ever had on my first one. The second one I went through, and I don't, you make a good thing of saying, "Hey, get a good night's sleep." I don't. After being a cop for 10 years, I don't sleep very
Mhm.
well. And then
Right.
I had to drive like 2 hours, and so they
Yep.
put me in this little tiny room that was nothing in there, and like I'm trying not to fall asleep during this thing, and like we get done, and he's like, "Well, I just don't think you're being totally honest, but I'm going to move you forward." And I'm like, "Dude, I've never even had a speeding ticket in my life," and so I don't hold any ill will, like, whatever. I mean, and I told the guy, I said, if you think I'm not telling the truth, then don't move me forward. Like, and so I do see the benefits of it, but I also can see that, like, hey, your external factors in your life, like either not sleeping or just
Yep.
being
Yep.
stressed out, like it can throw it off a little bit. And so I'm not negative towards polygraphs at all. Like it didn't work out for that reason for that job. And like, if that's the worst thing that happens to me in my life, I'll be okay. You know?
Yeah, sometimes people have an experience like you did, and I won't get into polygraph and how it works behind the scene, but I have a strong indication that you passed that polygraph. But a lot of agencies, what they'll do is they'll polygraph 5 times as many people as they're going to hire. So
Yep.
somebody will, they just didn't get the job because they're only hiring 2 people and there's 50 applicants. And it's just assumed that it was polygraph that kind of kept them from doing that. But
Yeah.
kind of what you're talking to me right now sounds like you did better in that polygraph than you're giving yourself credit for. But I
Yeah.
will say it is important to get sleep because cops, when I was in protection, we would work 24-hour shift work, 8-hour shifts or 16-hour shifts, whatever you were doing. And a lot of times what happens is that we would call you to set up the polygraph and your schedule would already be out, and you want this job, you want to try something new, and you're like, I work till midnight, or I work till 2, or you know what, I work till 6 a.m. The test will be at 10. I'll go home, I'll get a power nap. Well, that's a problem. So what I would always do is I would tell whoever I was testing, dude, I will work around your schedule, but I can't test you unless you get a solid 8. I can't test you unless you get something to eat. Well, what are people doing nowadays? Intermittent fasting,
Yes.
whatever the case may be, right? So they're not going to break their fast till noon. They got a polygraph at 10 o'clock. They haven't eaten for 20 hours. And yeah, you need blood sugar. So as far as that, I would say any listeners that are going to take a polygraph, definitely break your fast, get something to eat, get well hydrated. Even if you got to go down and get a hotel, the night before,
Yes.
just to get your mind right. Sometimes people have a new kiddo in the house, a new baby in the house, and they're not getting much sleep. That's something to definitely let your polygraph examiner know so that they can work around your schedule, because I want you to be fresh. I want everybody I talk to pass the test. And if they didn't pass, it's because they made a conscious choice to be dishonest with me.
Yes. I love that. So you get into the polygraph and you start learning more about active communication. How do those two commingle?
Yeah. So part of it is, once again, going back to what I just said, as far as trying to get people to pass, is I want to put them in the right headspace so that if there's something on their mind that they're worried about, it may be really important to them. Like, I'm sure you've been in situations, Brent, where if you've been on the road, you've pulled over a 16-year-old for going 10 miles an hour over, 12 miles an hour over. Not that big of a deal. You may have even given them a warning. But when you come up to the car, they are freaked out. Their world is over. They're going to have to tell their mom, right, that this is going on. And then there's other people that they're going 127 and a 55, and they're like, hey, what's the big deal?
Yes.
People's experiences are different. So I want to come in and I want to get a baseline of where this person's at. Is their heart rate 120? Do I need to slow down here a little bit and get them to calm down? Or are they calm, cool, and collected, San Diego weather type situation? They're just like this. That's perfect. So that maybe I can shorten down this initial interaction. Plus, what are some of the things in law enforcement we have to do immediately? We got to read Miranda. I mean, so what I see a lot of times, the problem is you first put handcuffs on somebody, and the next thing you know, you see it on cops a lot. Hey, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you do, that person's in fight or flight. They are going to err on the side of caution. That's not the time to be reading the Miranda. We want to get them, let them decompress. And I want to maybe get their head right by being, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read you a bunch of things. You may have seen this on TV, movies, those types of things. But before we get into that, I want you to know that even if you do choose to talk to me without a lawyer present, at any point here, you can change your mind and say, Brad, you know what? I don't want to talk to you anymore. I like to give people choices. I like to play fair. I like everything to be video recorded, right? I mean, sunshine is the ultimate disinfectant. And Brent, you're probably maybe on the cusp of being old enough, right, when dashboard cameras came in versus when we didn't have them, right? Everybody was freaking out, right? Like, oh my God, how many times does that help somebody on a DUI? Where
100%.
somebody said, you know what, Brent said this to me, or he did that to me, or he touched me here, whatever the case may be. Let's check the tape.
I'll
How
give
many
you a good
people has that
example of
saved?
that. I don't know if you saw this on the news about a month ago. There was an Edmond, Oklahoma police officer who was on a traffic stop, and a guy that was fixing to go to prison for sexual assault charges just came up and pepper sprayed him and attacked him, and he wasn't even involved in the traffic stop.
Wow.
Um, but what helped him, as soon as they started fighting, his body cam fell off,
Yeah.
but he had an in-car dash camera, and it saved
Yeah.
his bacon.
Yeah.
And so I've always laughed at those type of people that these tools that can help them out in their career, and they're like, "Oh, if you're doing it right, it ain't gonna hurt you."
If you're doing the right thing, it's not an issue. And the same thing happened with body cams, right? Oh my gosh, they're going to catch us in the bathroom. No, they're not. You can turn it off when you go to the bathroom, right? Like
Yes.
but it saves us so many times. Plus, it makes us do our job better, right? We can, you know, a football team, what do they do on Mondays? They check the tape and they
Yep.
say, hey, we did this bad, we did this good. We need to do that in law enforcement too. And then now that we're doing more and more of that during interrogations, we can get rid of bad practices, right? Threats, guarantees, reconstruction of memories, all these things that we know lead to false confessions. We can see them and be like, dude, don't do that. Right. So if you're doing the right thing, I always say the moment that video goes on, you're creating a movie for the prosecution. It's either going to be a good movie for the prosecution or it's going to be a horror movie that the defense attorneys are going to love. So just do the right thing. All right.
Yep.
So as far as, primacy, I'm a big fan when I talk communication of horns and halos, in that from an officer safety standpoint, we use our eyes and we use our ears more than anything. In that within a second, we're trying to determine, is Brent, if I'm coming up to the car, is Brent a threat to my well-being? Right. And we're trained on certain things to see, or when I'm in a interaction, is that person, are they Are they pieing off on their body? Are they making a fist? Are they clenching their jaw? Are they furrowing their brow? Okay, I might want to take a step back, right? I may want to get my taser ready. We're used to seeing those things, but most of my interactions, the frontline men and women that are in roles like yours, that's the most threatening position in law enforcement, being on a domestic violence call. Being a Secret Service agent, I've got 8 layers of people that come before me, right? So so many things are sanitized before me. So I'm definitely not the best person to ask when it comes to first impressions from an officer safety standpoint. But when it comes to first impressions in an interview room, I want to be able to focus on some of those other senses. So, and what I also want to do is, how many scammers or how many good criminals out there are very good at making first impressions? Ted Bundy was, many others were, right? You're going to know that when you pull over certain people or you're interrogating certain people, and they are so slick, right? Make such a great first impression. And we got to be careful about that because confirmation bias kicks in. And they made a great first impression and we're like, oh, they're good to go. Or somebody's just nervous. Law enforcement sometimes hits us at a very significant life event, right? In that not everybody is used to interacting with law enforcement. So they may be nervous. They may be doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And you have such a bad first impression at them that all of a sudden they become your chief suspect. You saw this in the Amanda Knox case where the Italian police saw that she was acting strange. Well, her roommate had just been killed. She's in a foreign country, and they viewed that immediately as she's guilty. Sometimes we do this on 911 calls where that was just a weird 911 call. You know what? I think he killed his wife, or maybe he did. But it's when we jump to those conclusions that are so problematic. So I know I'm kind of going on a riff here, but when I think first impressions, I think handshakes. They got to be dry. They have to be warm. So what I'll do is if I'm seated, I'll have my hand under my leg, and that'll warm my hand up. And I'll make sure that it's dry. I'll put antiperspirant on my hands. That's just a daily ritual with me. You'll never get a wet handshake from me, because those are the 2 things that science says are the worst handshake, right? A wet, cold, clammy handshake. So that's not going to happen. And it's not a shake, it's a hold. Too many people are sitting there just shaking like this, right? It's just, you just give a quick 1-second hold while you're looking in their eyes and you disconnect. But if you do those things, if you dress professionally, another big thing for me is, Brent, and I'm sure you've seen this after COVID, a lot of, in uniform, you have a uniform. But when we are in our personal time, or if we're doing an interview after hours, we've lowered the threshold of how we look professionally. And you're not going to want a surgeon. If a surgeon came in wearing flip-flops and shorts, doing a consultation, how comfortable would you feel with him or her being your surgeon? Probably not so much. So that level of professionalism, attire, is very important in that.
I love that. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a newer patrol officer, we had a big casino in our town, and criminals go to casinos. And I'll never forget, I had a sergeant. I love him to death, but every night we went to breakfast at 3 a.m. Like, that was his thing. Like, we don't work around that time. And this car passed me, had a headlight out, and I was like, man, it's getting close to breakfast time. I don't want to hear him gripe. Tail lights out. I'm like, all right, well, they're getting stopped. And so light them up. We're getting onto the interstate, and he slow rolls me. So clue number 1. We finally come to a stop. I go up, make my approach, and kind of like you said, your first impressions, you're going to pick up things, sometimes good, sometimes bad. He's just nervous. He's got clear prison tats all over his face. And so I'm thinking, okay, this guy's just nervous because the police. But as I start watching his body language, he's got a death grip on the steering wheel. And I'm like, okay, that throws a red flag up for me. So as I tell him, why I'm stopping him, hey, I need to see your driver's license, he won't answer me. He's just staring straight ahead. And I'm like, okay, red flag number 2. And so as I'm looking in the car, I see it was actually a legit Indian tomahawk, like blade, everything stuck in between the driver's seat and the console. And so I'm like, hey, man, like, with the way you're acting, you're not answering my questions. You're not telling me, like, you got an ID. You won't look at me. That weapon right there, like, hop on out. And he was so nervous, he had never put the car in park. And he actually put it in reverse. And as I'm telling him, he lets off the brake, and it starts going back towards my patrol car. And I'm yelling at him, like, man, stop. You're about to hit my car. Stop, stop, stop. And he's just so nervous.
Hmm.
His body froze up and he couldn't
Hmm.
put it in park. And he finally, like, maybe like that far away from my car, puts it in park. I'm like, thank
Thank God.
God. So my partner shows up about this time, and he gets out of the car finally. And I said, hey, do you mind patting him down for weapons? Because there's a weapon in there. And he pats him down. This, unfortunately, Oklahoma is one of the liberalist medical marijuana states there is now, but this was before it was legal. And he pats him down. He's like, hey, man, what's that big bulge in your pocket? And he's like, oh, that's my marijuana. My partner's like, okay. So he pulls it out, and it actually ended up being a trafficking amount of methamphetamine.
Oof. Oh.
And he had been out of prison doing a 10-year bid for robbery for 10 days,
Hmm.
and it was key to me as a patrolman that my first impression was that he was nervous because I'm stopping him.
Correct.
But as I took the totality of everything in, and I kept building upon my initial stop, the way he's acting, it wasn't adding up.
Yeah.
And you have to pay attention to the way people interact with you verbally, their body language, everything, because those clues matter in a life or death job.
Yeah, when you go into it thinking a certain way, it's very hard to knock yourself out of that. I worked a homicide case. It was a missing person, presumed homicide case in Illinois, and it involved a biker gang, the outlaw biker gang. And I didn't know that much about the outlaws or biker gangs in general. This is pre Sons of Anarchy, so I didn't even have a Hollywood version of bikers. And there were two suspects. They were both best friends, and they were both dating the missing female. One was a one percenter. I mean, the ATF agent working the case said this guy's got bodies on him. He's killed people. We just haven't been able to bring him in. So the guy's a hang around, doesn't even have a bike. He's just doing chores around the house, to basically try to get in good and become, a probationary member. But he's maybe 5'6", 120 pounds, dripping wet. The other guy's 6'4", about 250, has a look of Satan. So I think, you know what? I'm going to start polygraphing the small guy. He might have seen something. We'll break him, maybe flip it into the one percenter. Well, this guy fails, and I keep talking to him for about 5 hours. I'm talking to him, and he keeps saying that's not it. And I was going along the lines of, you must have saw something. You're afraid of this guy. I get it. Let me help you, so on and so forth. And luckily, two detectives that weren't involved with the case were watching, and they're like, man, he keeps saying that's not it. I wasn't picking up on it. I had tunnel vision, right? There's no way this guy could be a killer. I stepped out of the room. They said, hey, you mind if we step in for a few minutes? There in maybe 27 seconds. I think that was the exact amount of time. And they said, you keep saying that's not it. What is it? Oh, I killed her, cut her up in 6 pieces and threw her in the river. I could not view him as a killer, and I could not get off of that original impression. So that's one thing as investigators and law enforcement, street cops, we need to be careful of, is making that first assumption, because assumptions are many, many times wrong.
Absolutely. Um, I think you touched on a very important topic, especially like when you're interviewing people, the importance of having an outside person viewing it, not in
Mhm.
there, because they pick up on things that you may not see, or not picking up on at all. And like, you may miss a giant clue like that, like you said. And let's be honest, every police officer has probably done that at some point in their career. It
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And I love that you touched on that, because that's so important.
How many times are you in an interview or are you on a stop and you forget a question to ask?
Yes.
And I wish I would have asked that. That's why we always do all our interviews with two individuals in the interview room. Okay. We may have somebody watching as well, but they're mirroring my body language, which is always open. Okay. I don't want closed body language. I don't want arms crossed, legs crossed. We call those anchor points. I basically want a slight lean forward with a clipboard. I don't want to be across the table. I want to be on the same side of the table. I want to be able to see their complete body. When we talk about body language, it's not detection of deception that you get from body language. It's either stress or not stress. But I do want to see level of reception to my message. And especially with the lower body, are their feet facing the door? Are they facing my partner? Many times I've had partners where, for whatever reason, I have a female partner and she's a female. Maybe it's a shaken baby, or what we call traumatic brain injury case on a kid. I may be the embodiment. I'm a bigger guy. I'm bald head. I may be the embodiment of her domestic partner who's, assaulting her. So she may relate better to my female partner. So having that other person in there is almost like a cheat code because you can have another avenue to connect with somebody. And also, I may be rationalizing, minimizing, projecting when I'm theming them in an interrogation, and I don't know really what's working because I'm so busy cognitively putting my words together. My partner sees the nonverbal level of reception, and they're like, "Wow, he or she really liked that or didn't like that." And the problem that we have in law enforcement interviewing is we're afraid to bring that other person in because we have a lot of type A's in law enforcement, as you know, and
Yes.
we're afraid our partner is going to step in, and like I'm in the middle of a train of thought and they step in. So what we do is we do a call to the bullpen. And what I mean by that is if I feel like I'm running out of steam and I want to pass the baton, I'll touch my watch, and my partner knows, hey, I'm about to pass the baton to you. Or the secondary in the room typically is my air traffic controller, metaphorically, because let's say we're dumping the phone or we're searching the phone or something was found in the search warrant or somebody outside the room looks something up and they're like, that's BS. What they're doing is they're not communicating with me, because the most disrespectful thing I can do when I'm talking to you is do what? Look at the phone. They're talking to the secondary and they're saying, hey, guess what? Boom, boom, boom. And then my partner can hit his watch or do whatever sign they want to do. And then I know, you know what? I need to pass the baton because there's some new information that came into this. And we look seamless and we don't look like we're stepping on each other. So I'm a big believer in having the second person in the room, but having defined roles within that.
I love that. Um, so let me ask you, what are some ways to when you're doing these active listening things? Because I think a lot of people think they're active listening and they're not. You know, they hear what people are saying, but they're not hearing what they're actually saying. How do you recommend like people get better at actually listening?
Well, do it in your personal life. For one, is that many times we turn that switch off when we get out of work. And I know I'm guilty of it sometimes, right? My wife of 27 years will probably say that sometimes as well. But active listening, it's a moniker that a lot of times we hear it and it's oh yeah, I active listen. It's mirroring back the last three words of what somebody says. It's giving those minimal encouragers, right? It's using mimicry. Okay. When I say mimicry, we hear mirroring, we hear body language mirroring, but I am not going to do things immediately while you're doing it. Like if you cross your arms, I'm not going to immediately cross my arms, things like that. But I may cross my wrists, okay, on the same side. Or you cross your legs at the knee, I may slowly cross them at the ankle. Because ultimately I don't want those anchor points. So, but I'm going to subtly mimic because people like people that are like them. We've heard that quote before, right? And also, I go back to Dale Carnegie almost 100 years ago, where he talks about to be interesting, you need to be interested. And so I want to have some curiosity. I want to feign interest, even if there's times where, and I'm sure you're the same way, where you're talking to people and you don't really want to hear this story. Somebody walks up to your car and they start telling you a tall tale and you're like, oh my God, right? You'd rather be at your 3 a.m. breakfast.
Yes.
But I learned long ago when I was in graduate school, I was a snot-nosed kid, but the best paying job we had in our criminology department was working in the city jail in St. Louis and interviewing arrestees on their drug use habits and gang affiliation. And I had very little common with the men and women I was speaking with. But it's amazing when you go from inquisiting to being curious and you're like, really? Tell me about that. Oh, that's so interesting. When your eyes light up and you turn them into the teacher. I learned how to make crack. I learned how to make moonshine. I learned how to be the world's best pimp, according to the person telling me this. I would learn all these things, and then you put that in your own data set, and then you can use it later on in your law enforcement career. But after talking to about 1,000 of these arrestees, it's amazing. Everybody has something to teach. Everybody has a passion. Everybody has an addiction. And I don't mean that in a bad way. My addiction's Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I love it. I've got to have my fix, right? So you got to find what's that person's fix. And then you got to sit back and listen. And when I say listen, it's not interrupting. So if I said, hey, Brent, what are you doing this weekend? I'm running a 5K. What's the worst thing I could do right at that moment is say, oh, I did a 5K. I just took the spotlight off of you and I put it on me. But how many times have we seen that happen, right?
Yes.
I want you to bathe in that. Oh, dude, what is it? Oh, it's going to be down at the, down at the port. Oh man, that's awesome. And good weather for it. How long you been training for it? Like, your eyes are going to light up. Your dopamine is going to be hitting. Your serotonin is going to be hitting. You're not going to have cortisol, so you're not going to be stressed because you're talking about something that's a struggle for you, that's a challenge, that is something that you look forward to. And then at a certain point, I may say, yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to do one of those as well. But I always hate that when you're talking to somebody and they try to one-up you with their experiences. Let them bathe. I don't know if you deer hunt or if you turkey hunt or do anything like that, but what's the first thing that happens when I go deer hunting and I kill a 140-inch deer and I'm so happy, blah, blah, blah. What does everybody do with their phone? Oh, look at what I killed. Yep. Right? Dude, walk me through the hunt. Tell me about it. That's just something in life where we're all narcissistic at a certain point. And to me, active listening is just letting them have the spotlight and you subtly guiding it with those little head nods. Kind of like when when my mom calls and she's telling me certain things, and if you don't every 10 seconds be like, what's she going to do? Did I lose you? Are we still connected? This is the nonverbal version of that. You just have to give them those little minimal encouragers. And, raise that eyebrow. It's amazing when you raise that eyebrow, or you're doing a affirmation statement, or like an intentional, like people want to correct other people. So you're like, oh man, I heard that was really hard. Oh, it's not that hard, blah, blah, blah. That's when you get the snowball rolling and you have valuable conversations.
Absolutely. I'm working on my coaching certification right now, and a lot of those topics are the same thing that we do in coaching. Mm-hmm. And I think those principles are so great, especially for first responders that work on a shift and for like shift supervision. How often do we want a supervisor just to ask, like, hey, how's your day going? How's everything going? Like, and they don't. They treat you like, the hands off, we don't want to interact with you. And like, there's so much more that can be gleaned on a shift management level if you just pay attention and listen to your officers and learn a little bit about them and say, yeah, that's awesome. Like, and just kind of those small affirmations. And you can make the world to that person that's on your shift because, hey, Sarge took 5 minutes of his time to listen to the, big bass I caught today at the river.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, granted, law enforcement, you don't always have Saturdays, Sundays off, but the analogy would be, I always like to ask on Fridays, what are you doing this weekend? And on Mondays, what did you do this weekend? And if, your chief, if your lieutenant asks you those questions, don't just, hey, I'm going fishing. Oh man, where are you going? Right? Or I'm barbecuing. What are you firing up? What kind of grill you working with? Oh, you got a green egg? Oh my God, those are awesome, dude. I heard you could almost forge steel in those things. Like, how hard is it? Like, where'd you, it's amazing where that conversation can go and the connections that can be made as a result. Don't just stop with the first question. It's what the next question is.
Absolutely. I want to touch on, how did you get into writing a book? That seems like the holy grail sometimes for a lot of cops was, man, how do you get an article published? Or how do you write a book? Like, how did you go down that road?
Yeah. So I just been keeping really good journals over the last, 15, 20 years. And, being blessed to work a lot of major cases as far as homicides and sadly, a lot of child sexual assaults and how to deal with those child sexual assaults. I can't remember, it was probably 2 years ago. I was talking to another author who's written a lot of books, and I was just telling some stories, and the author was like, you know what? Like, what you're telling me now is like, you're engaging in difficult conversations and there's no impetus for people to talk to you, give you information against self-interest. Like, that would help parents. That would help coaches. That would help, teachers. That would help supervisors. And so what I did is I just tried to take it from start to finish, soup to nuts. How do we prepare? How do we, I'm a big believer in you would never take off on a plane if you didn't have a flight plan. Yep. So what's my plan with this conversation? And I'm sure you're the same way. Before you jump on a podcast, you try to research the person you're talking to, or it's going to be a pretty boring podcast, right?
Yep.
So we don't do that though. And too many times there's a good part and there's a bad part. The good part is I will do that. I will look at someone's Instagram, at their Facebook, at their social media profile, because I'm not trying to manipulate them, but I'm trying to find areas to avoid and areas to maybe go into. In that I want to almost create that mythical social media stream. I mean, if we jump on Facebook and we type in bass, or we type in turkey, or we type in deer, or on Instagram, whatever, what's going to be the next thing that's going to slowly start coming into our feed, right?
Yep.
Fishing lures, boats, whatever the case may be, right? And it's doing that because it's trying to create the perfect stream of information. We have to do the same thing when we talk to people. And some of that's just going to come naturally from follow-up questions. But if I can go into the start of that conversation already equipped with, let me use this example, Brent. What's your favorite genre of music?
Red dirt.
Okay. So you're going to have to help me there. When I say type of music, we're talking, is that country?
Yeah, red dirt country. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You got a lot of red dirt out in Oklahoma, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's more specific than I would usually get. Usually people would say country, and then I'd say, who's your favorite artist? And they'd say George Strait. And I'd be like, God dang, George Strait, that's 40 years. You're not really tightening that front sight aperture, right? But if I ask you, what's your favorite song? And you give me whatever it is, The Cowboy Rides Away by George Strait. That is very specific, right? I'm front sight focused now, and I have an idea of what makes you tick musically, right? So I take that metaphor and I try to do it with all someone's likes and interests. And a lot of times we'll do a search warrant, and what I'll do is I'll be in the backside of the house, and unbeknownst to them, I'm walking through their house. It's a search warrant, and I'm seeing who's their favorite sports team, what's their movie collection, what's on their computer, right? What Bible chapter did they just read last night? And all that information goes up here. Now, that's the good part of it, because I'll use that, investigatively. But what's the bad part of it is that the men and women out there that are on dating sites, do we not think that people that you meet are not going onto your social media and creating the mythical perfect person to interact with?
Yes.
And you're going to meet them, and they're going to, oh my God, he knows me. Oh my God, she's the greatest, right? She might just be a socially engineered construct of that perfect person. And we see that in a lot of dating scams. When I was getting out of the Secret Service, the dating scams were just going through the roof, because these scammers in India, Africa, the Philippines, wherever in the United States were, getting a picture, now using AI, and just basically finding your interest and going on eHarmony or whatever. And you just naturally, you're like, oh my God, they're perfect for me. So that's the negative side.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse.
Correct.
So if somebody wants to buy your book, where can they get a copy of your book at?
The hard copy is not coming out till February of 26, but it is on Amazon. It's through Simon & Schuster and Matt Hole Books. Very, very blessed to have some people help me out. So throw it in your cart, keep it there for the next 5 months, and then, pull the trigger on it next February. But you can definitely find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Brad Beeler 1865, same thing on Instagram. And then bradleybeeler.com will be up in a couple weeks. I'm learning. I'm an old guy, so I'm learning all this new search engine optimization, website development. I got some good people, but it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks when it comes to this new world that we live in, Brent.
Awesome. Well, to wrap up, I want to ask you one question. Mm-hmm. Looking back on your long career, what is one piece of advice you'd give somebody wanting to get into the first responder field?
Okay, so after they get in, I would say definitely get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. So I focus on the after part, because I think that's so important, is that there are so many gyms out there right now that offer discounted memberships, half off, whatever the case may be. Shoot, some offer free, memberships.
Yes.
I have gotten so much more confident in my 10 years training, where if something did pop off, I would feel a lot more comfortable. And the amount of physical interactions that I've got in pales into comparison to the average beat cop who is making contact with people maybe every shift. And we see, sadly, a lot of the lethal interactions, or that turn lethal, or even that turn violent, many times happen as a result of our men and women that maybe are a little tentative, and they're going to the toolbox too quickly. They're going to their tool belt, a little too quickly, or going further down that tool belt because they don't feel comfortable physically. Maybe they can't help their partner out because they don't feel comfortable physically. And I truly believe this is the 100th year anniversary of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that it is not the end all be all. It is not perfect, but in the law enforcement capacity where we can't strike people, unless there's certain sets of circumstances, use of force continuum. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we can almost do in any situation. So I would say after we get on, definitely that. And then I would say, as far as Brent, people that are getting into the first responder field, whether it be as an EMT, whether it be as a firefighter, whether it be as a local cop, is listen to those sergeants, listen to those people that have been around 20 years. I mean, if we had 2-3 hours on this podcast, I could tell you some stories of what I've learned from those gray-haired men and women, right? Is that too often we come in, what am I going to learn from this old person, right? You're going to learn a lot. And also realize that a 25-year career is truly a marathon and it's not a sprint. So take your time, acquire those skills. And just when you think you've got it figured out at the 2 or 3 year mark, realize you don't know nothing, right? You know nothing.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the most dangerous officer out there is not the one that's the brand new person, right? It's the one that's been out a couple years that think, oh, I'm good. I got this sorted, right? They maybe put themselves in a situation that somebody else wouldn't. That rookie would be like, I'm not doing that. I'm calling for backup. So I would say have a good wolf pack or friend around you that can do a little self-assessment. And that could be mentally, if you're going through a hard time. I know working a lot of the child sexual abuse cases that I did, it was nice to have some people that said, hey man, Brad, you're working a lot of these cases. Why don't you take a step back? So having the people that are there for you to make sure you're mentally good, because we have way too much suicide in law enforcement, but also having the self-assessment to realize there's certain things I need to tighten up with. Could be my marksmanship, could be my self-defense, it could be my legal acumen, whatever the case may be. But always keep training, get 1% better every day. And if you do that, after 25 years, you're going to be pretty damn good at what you're doing.
Very true. Brad, thank you so much for joining me today, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.